2:05. We're going to go ahead and start. Welcome to everybody that's here. I'm Lisa Walker, and this is the August edition of Corridor Conversations. It's an online series looking at the people, culture, and heritage of our area here along the Route 1 corridor. We're really excited to have Hyattsville resident Reuben Jackson, a poet and a jazz expert, to be with us today, and I will introduce him in a couple of minutes. I just want to say a few things about Corridor Conversations. We created this program. It was created by the villages along Route 1, so that includes Hyattsville Aging in Place, Helping Hands University Park, Neighbors Helping Neighbors College Park, and Explorations on Aging College Park. Our intention was to get beyond sort of traditional aging programs and to offer things that are, fun and entertaining for everybody. And since we're still sort of in COVID and we're still sort of Zooming, we are continuing this online program. One of the things I want to say is that we are very pleased to have gotten support from the Anacostia Trails Heritage Area and Maryland Milestone, so they are supporting these sessions. We are really honored to have Reuben here with us today, Reuben Jackson. He's a poet and jazz expert. He curated the Smithsonian's Duke Ellington collection for more than 20 years and is currently an archivist at the University of the District of Columbia Felix E. Grant Jazz Archives. He's also a co-host of WPFW's The Sound of Surprise Sundays from 4 to 6, so you could catch him at that program tomorrow, I believe.
Next Sunday.
Next,
That's okay.
next, okay.
Right.
Okay. His music reviews have appeared in the media, including the Washington Post, the Washington City Paper, Jazz Times, and NPR's All Things Considered. He's also an educator and a mentor with Young Writers Project and has taught poetry for years at the Writers Center in Bethesda, Maryland. His poems have been widely published in anthologies. He'll be reading from his latest collection, Scattered Clouds, and we'll discuss how growing up in Washington, D.C. continues to influence his writing. Welcome, Reuben. I'm going to turn the microphone over to you, but maybe you want to start with telling us a little bit about how you got into poetry. Were you writing at a very early age?
Sure. Thank you all, first of all, for allowing me to trade fours, to use a musical metaphor, about the word, as we say in the Baptist church, which is where I grew up, and the relationship to music. To answer your question, I was always in love with that old movie, The Sound of Music. So I think of,
Mm-hmm.
language will obviously evoke and describe things, but hearing the way it described things always entranced me. So I often say, because it's true, the first poets I heard, and I'm stretching the term poet, were the old AM DJs. And I know some of you remember, it's like that rapid banter where it's like
Mm.
they'd say, at the top of the hour, Sam Cooke, the Temptations, and all that. Plus, growing up in church, we lived in church. I'm a family of four, my parents, of course, and my late brother Al. And you'd be in church, well, when you're a kid, it seems like forever. But, you're hearing ministers develop ideas based on themes, or passages of scripture. And so there's both that which ties into music. So it's thematic development plus the sound, different ministers, like different musicians, will emphasize things in a different way. So I was always listening to that. And there were people in my neighborhood in Northwest DC who could turn certain phrases, often profane, mind you,
Yeah.
into like soliloquies. So there was a guy named Butch who could, I won't use the term, I'll just say, well, in music, there's a term mezzo forte. So just take the M and the F and you see where I'm going. But he could make it, it's like an accolade, an insult, but they sounded like sonatas to me. So I would try and make him say it so I could hear it. And one day he figured out, he called me bookworm because I read started reading very early on. He said, "Bookworm, you're just trying to make me say blah 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 because you like the way it sounds." So that, I mean, informally is where I would say my relationship with music and language began. So I'm talking 3, 4 years old. Now, in terms of trying to write, this is a funny story, and it's one of those mysteries I guess I'll take with me to wherever you go when you leave here. I was in 10th grade at Western High School in DC, which is now Duke Ellington School for the Arts. And my 10th grade homeroom teacher was an English teacher, Ms. Milbury. And she also edited the school newspaper. See, it's great to be with older peers because I can use these terms and none of you look at me like I'm, you know, talking about stuff that happened when King Tut was a baby. Uh, but she came to me one Friday and said, "We need a poem for the school newspaper. Bring one in on Monday." And I assumed she meant, a poet of her choosing. So I said, "Well, who do you like? I'll go to the library." And she says, "No, you write one." And I thought, is she mad at me? Why is she asking me to do this? So I went home and I deliberately said, "I'm going to write the worst poem I can, and then she'll leave me alone." So the poem, boy, plus high school poetry can be a little dramatic and kind of mawkish, but it was entitled, because it was a young woman who sat in front of me in algebra class with one of those beautiful, flawless Angela Davis afros. So it's like Ode to the Sister with the Most Perfect Afro. So I wrote this thing dripping with sugar. I take it in Monday and say, "Okay, here's the poem." She says, "Great. I love this. You're a staff poet. We need a poem every month." And I'm like this, like I really messed up. So every month I was responsible for writing something. And I began to like it, I would go to the public library and take out tons of poetry books. And if you know the old Dewey Decimal System, like 811 is the Dewey number for poetry. So I would just kind of knock all the poetry books off the shelf and have like, some under this arm, some under this arm. And you're reading all kinds of people stylistically, chronologically, all that. And I just got deeper and deeper into the water, shall we say. And like with anything, playing an instrument, you go through periods of imitation and all that. So that, I mean, that in a kind of semi-short answer is how I kind of got started, and then I just kept. It just really took hold of me. That's the best way to describe it.
That's great. Do you want to read some of your poems from Scattered
Sure, sure.
Clouds? Yeah,
Yeah. I get kind of silly sometimes. So like, are you seeing this? Here's the cover. I
that's
say
great.
scattered clowns, because like you get silly. But I always start with this piece. It's the first poem in the book, and let me just also say quickly, this book consists of the complete. My first volume, Fingering the Keys, came out in, my gosh, 1990, and this with newer poems came out October 2019, which almost seems that far away because how has the world changed since
Mm.
October 2019? But this piece is called "On the Road, Columbia, South Carolina, Spring 1959," and to me, it's kind of the moment or one of the moments in which, to quote an old comedian, I can never remember who said this, but he said, "First I was a child, and then I was black."
Mm.
On the Road, Columbia, South Carolina, Spring 1959. I remember enormous teepees, neon Indians dancing and dancing around them. I did my best to convince father that he was tired and that we should spend the night at the Frontier Motel. "Fine Southern cooking," the sign said. "Columbia, South Carolina's best. We could call Aunt Bertha, assure her we'd arrive in Augusta tomorrow. I would spend my savings on ribbons for Maureen's hair. It worked. So why did my father return without room keys? I
Mm.
watched the village disappear from the back seat of his Ford."
Mm.
Okay.
Right.
Um, and I'm just another quick thing about this poem. The title, of course, comes from the Jack Kerouac classic On the Road. And what I began thinking about was the experiences that the characters, what Dean Moriarty and Sal Paradise had on the road, and that interest in Americana, like neon lights and all that stuff, and two-lane highways, but the variation being the complexity of the quote American experience and for people of color, or specifically, Black people. And then as a kid confronting this and thinking too about my father's, crushed pride. So like, you watch the village disappear because you can't do that. But uh, that's why I start with that, because it's kind of the beginning of understanding that one has to deal with, as who said this, Dr. Dre, it's the chronic, racism and racial complexity as the chronic. So let's see. I'm gonna jump around a bit chronologically here too, just so you know. I was talking with a college friend. This last year has been interesting in that, like, touching base with people as best one can via Zoom or uh, that kind of thing. And you look up and people you knew when you were 18, 19 are now in their 60s and older. And about, I think this was last spring, I got a message from a woman I lived in the same dorm with. I went to Goddard College in central Vermont. She was the first person I had like a slow dance with. Now, if you include the dances I did with myself, like Tom Cruise and Risky Business, that's different. But, we're talking about that. And I said, you were my first slow dance. And I wrote this poem for you, 98 years after this happened. But this is, so I guess I know we're talking about DC, and we'll focus primarily on that in terms of place. But I guess, as my mother once said, well, son, all poems happen somewhere, which is true. So this is 1975. It was a long way to go for a party, 15 minutes from Canada, moon just above my right hand. It was winter. She was a school teacher who smelled of jasmine. Stevie Wonder crooned, looking for another pure love, while Jeff Beck spun gorgeous fills and solos. We danced as well as our cumbersome boots would allow. And, and I don't know, I think this whole thing about the cumbersome boots, they were Timberland boots, which at that point, like, I had come home for spring break and I went to the barber shop. And I walk in and people are, Reuben, how you doing? How's college? And uh, my barber, I mean, his birth name's Walter, but they called him Smooth because he was and is. And he says, what are you wearing? Those are the ugliest damn boots I ever saw in my life. But see, of course, Timberlands were not worn all year like they are now. This is 1975. And in Vermont, well, you know enough to know, like, winter is no joke. So I tell young people, and I've told them when I've done after school programs, I said, listen, I'm your Jackie Robinson. I said, what do you mean? Because I wore Timberlands and took a lot of grief, so you don't have to do it. And now you see people summer, spring, fall, and but just that whole thing of change, there's like a place, but your relationship with a place geographically and all those kinds of things. And slow dancing in Timberlands. That'd have been a good book title, maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway, are there? I mean, I can. Should I stop? Or are there questions?
I don't see any questions.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go ahead. I'm sorry, Gene.
Okay. Let's see. All right. One of the funny things about getting older is a lot of your sentences, as you know, begin with, didn't that used to be, didn't this restaurant used to be something else, or didn't so and so used to live here? And I was talking with a colleague a couple weeks ago about the fact that RFK Stadium is slated for demolition. And I said, wow, my family used to go and see the old Washington Senators. And then this week, Charlie Watts, who died,
Nine.
uh, at the age of 80, of course, an integral member of the Rolling Stones. And I thought, well, this poem was inspired by an afternoon back in July 4th, 1972, when uh, Stevie Wonder opened for the Rolling Stones, and so I'm thinking about RFK Stadium and everything else which happened at that time. But it's the uh, it seems obvious with the importance of memory as catalyst for attempting to recapture something, to hopefully have it connect with you, the reader, the listener, and to quote the great soprano saxophonist Sidney Bechet, there's so much to remember, and I think that is, needless to say, the truth. So this is the trip, July 4th, 1972, and it is quote unquote about Stevie Wonder and that day, I guess you'd say. Trip. Blue sky afternoon, African robed genius in the distance performing new lyrical ballads and hip grinding chestnuts whose bass lines I remembered from my father's Saturday night with Bonton potato chips, dip, Ballantine scotch and beer parties where someone was always asking for Lucille. Today Stevie sings, "Where were you when I needed you?" His guitarist follows every synthesized turn with lovely guitar licks. "Where are you?" Randy asks, wiping a denim sleeve across my brow. I thought I saw a question
Yeah,
float by. Okay,
there's a couple of questions related to Vermont. How
okay.
long were you in Vermont?
Mhm.
You worked at Vermont Public Radio. Did you stay beyond college or Goddard?
Okay, yeah, thank you. Um, I was at, I went to Goddard, well, so 1975, I graduated 1978. My desire was to work. It's still there. It's Bear Pond Books in Montpelier. I wanted to stay in Vermont and work at Bear Pond Books. And well, this is about my family. So I went to my parents and said, I'd like to stay here and work in this bookstore and maybe teach part time. Well, my father was more taciturn than my mother. Uh, so he wouldn't have said, but my mother just looked at me and she gave me what I called the great silence, which meant no. And then she said, "Do you know how much your college education costs?" So I came back here uh, in December, December 1978 after graduation. I went back in 2011. In fact, this past week, I taught high school for 2 years, Burlington High Schools, the same week this tropical storm Irene ravaged a lot of the state. Um, and then the second year, so beginning of the 2012 school year, this position for host of Friday Night Jazz, Vermont Public Radio, opened up, and I figured, not unlike my job working with the Ellington collection at American History for 20 years, I didn't think I had a chance in Hades of getting this. So it's kind of like, I tell this joke too often, but it's like, the actress Regina King's like, if I ask Regina King out for a date, and of course, well, it's safe because she's like, who the heck are you? But then I got this job. So from 2012 to 2018, I was host of Friday Night Jazz, and then I worked and still work as a mentor with Young Writers Project, which is based in Burlington. But of course, when I was there, it was uh, literal, not virtual, going around the state. So it was phase one and then phase two. I sometimes wonder, like with "It's a Wonderful Life," when the angel Clarence says to Jimmy Stewart's character, "Well, what would your life have been if these things hadn't happened?" I know, it would have been a completely different life if I had stayed after graduation. And so it's I don't know, it's interesting to think about that. But the concrete answers are that, yeah, so college and then DC and then back, for a bit. So that was 7, 11, 7, almost 8 years. Yeah, the second time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep going.
Where? Okay. Now this is from the Oh, actually, do you want me to answer that question
Sure.
about the rewrites? Um,
You want to restate?
could
Everybody
you?
can
Yeah,
see.
could you please?
Everybody can see it, so yeah.
Okay. Could
Am I doing that?
could you
Okay,
please?
when you
Thank
create
you.
a poem, do you apply rewrites, revisions? How do you know or feel the poem is finished?
That's a great question. It's the every poet's question. I revise a lot, and if there's one thing that's different from the person who tried writing poetry in my 20s as an undergrad and now, is that I revel in revision, which is almost alliterative. And I used to think revision was like, you have one idea and that's it, and don't let the man mess with your creativity. But if you think about arranging a room, like, do you want the armoire by the window? Do you want it in another room? Do you want your grandmother in the third stanza? Does your grandmother belong in another poem? Those things to me are, I just enjoy doing it because it's like, you'll listen to some jazz recording, there'll be like 6 takes, and maybe the third take they take the bass solo out. Maybe it's like that. So I'm constantly tinkering, and I really like it, which still gets quizzical looks from people. And how do you know when it's finished? Someone said no poem was ever finished, it's only abandoned. But for me, I guess if it gets as close to whatever my intention or intentions were at the outset, then you go with that. I mean, the funny thing too is, of course, like I'll look at older poems and I'll say they remind me of, if you look at high school yearbook pictures and you think, damn, did I really wear that to the mixer? But it's where you are at a given time. And I have actually read poems from this book and changed things while sharing them, because maybe that's like a nod to jazz too. And you just keep going. You do the best you can. And I think of poets like William Butler Yeats, who was constantly revising things, or Walt Whitman, who would say, well, yeah, we're doing it this way. And so maybe in a way you're never done, but I think between structural reconfiguration and thematic reconsideration of ideas is a lot to do. You can, so between that and what people call real life, I guess we're all multitaskers if we if we attempt to write poetry. I don't know. I think I saw another. Was there another
Yeah,
question?
there's some more. Yeah.
Okay.
Does your love of jazz influence how or what you write? Would you characterize your poetry rhythm like avant-garde jazz, like Charlie Bird, or the mellow, like Lonnie Liston Smith?
Wow, these are wonderful questions. Well, for me, again, to quote that the title of that old film, I love the sound of music. I think maybe that is the most uh, obvious or literal connection to jazz from my perspective. I also think that and there's sort of a misnomer where jazz is concerned. Some people think it just, you just play it and it floats from midair, but it's um, the freedom, for want of a better term, based on structure. And with that, that may be more of a connection for me, especially lately. I don't have any today to share, but I tinker much more with form than I used to, like sonnets, villanelles, and those sorts of things, because, again, I don't see them as prisons. I see them as gateways to boom, and it gives your voice a chance to I don't know, think of like an actor or actress. Like maybe one film you're the romantic lead, maybe the next film you're the gangster. And I think it's important to keep the voice uh, interested, stimulated, and not to well, to mention jazz. Like Lester Young, the saxophonist, told an interview where he says, "I try not to be a repeater pencil." So I guess, but back to the thing about you know influence, whether it's mellow or something like that. Uh, there are people I think about, like Miles Davis's muted trumpet, but um, I would never pretend that I was even in the same county as that sort of thing. It's just for me, it's they're examples of uh, beauty, and things which go beyond whatever influenced them to touch other people. But yeah, but I do deeply believe in the power of the language. Like again, what it can describe and how it describes what it does. And I saw a guy on the metro not long ago, and maybe I don't know, this is the best example to share, but this woman walked by. She's getting off the train, and he said, "Baby," and and she kind of smiled, but it was like somebody hit a cymbal with a brush, not like a drumstick, ding, like it was like, psst, and I thought, wow, yeah, and it was meant as a compliment. It was taken as such, but just that sound, I think poetry happens all the time, and how we harness it and share it, respectively, like as writers, is that's part of the game, and you hope for singularity. That's the other thing I would say. If you hear Miles Davis or Lonnie Liston Smith, their sound, and that's one of the things I was told. This was years ago. The poet Gwendolyn Brooks gave a reading at the Library of Congress, and I was in like 11th grade, so I'm kind of on the road, no pun, at this point. And you know, Miss Brooks, what can you give advice to a young aspiring writer? And she says, keep writing and you know, embrace your voice. And I thought I was a little crestfallen because I wanted some deep, profound thing, but that was the deep, profound thing. It's like, what do you or I have to say about something, and what distinguishes us from any of you or the poet down the street or someone across the water or in another state, and to be true to what you're aiming in the direction of, and to not, to eschew cliche and all that. There are a lot of decisions to make, like with playing golf. It's like par three, 85 yards. Which club do you use? But like I said, I love that now. I don't fight with it. It's kind of like, eh. And some days I know you try to work on a poem, and the poem will say, nah, time to go watch Law and Order reruns, or go do your laundry, or whatever it is, pay your bills. So, you know, if that hope that answers the question. Ask a Southerner a simple question. Something my mother used to say. We go on and on. So,
Well, we've got some more questions if you
okay,
want to answer them.
sure.
You mentioned an influence of AM radio disc jockeys on your poetic voice.
Right.
Excuse me. Does it work the other way too? Does your poetry influence your banter as a DJ?
Oh boy, I would say so. And there are a lot of lanes on this highway. I once told my former boss, my principal, when I taught at Burlington High School, that she says, "Well, what's it like?" Because I'm teaching my second year, and I've got this then part-time job at Vermont Public Radio. She says, "Well, what's it like doing both?" And I said, "Well, but they're similar because crafting a unit of study and crafting a playlist is not so far removed." And I say that because I think it's classroom teaching and hosting a radio show. They're both oral uh, ways of, forgive the redundancy, presentation. And there's an arc, and you want to keep it interesting. So yeah, they are similar, and I often pull from things, 40, 50 years ago, and because there's some rubric in public radio which says you don't really get comfortable until like 5 years in. And I think by like the fourth or fifth year doing the show, I was, I would pull like things from characters, people I knew growing up here. And so in a sense, I was using, poetic influences on the air. Like there's, toward the end of my tenure as host of Friday Night Jazz, I used the themes by a saxophonist named Kamasi Washington. So kind of updated version of Claude Debussy's Clair de Lune, like a slow dance tempo. So you have like those beautiful French impressionistic harmonies. And I said, well, you know, imagine little Claude Debussy coming into a house party on like 7th and Kennedy Northwest, this little French dude, and he asks Brenda Jones, who was like, she broke more hearts than, I don't know. And he says, Brenda, would you dance with me? And she says, you little nerdy boy, you must be crazy. And you're saying this, but that's some of that language, it's experience, but it's that particular timbre which comes from a particular place. Uh, so it is interactive. I would say it is interactive. And the last thing I'd say about that is I was the kid who my friends and I would be in my parents' basement listening to music. And, you hear all the hit records, you play 45s, but I was the one who would flip the side over, like the B side, and I would say something nerdy like, okay, listen to this song. In the fifth bar, there's like a harpsichord counter melody, and they go, Reuben, would you please shut the heck up? But that those descriptions too are part of, the kind of fuel for writing. And I feel fortunate being able to host, co-host the show because I can kind of talk about those things. But I guess my point is that language, the richness of it, and that kind of thing are they drive both, and they do. It's like a tennis match, like it goes back and forth, back and forth.
Cool. Well, you want to read something before we go on with another question?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so my family moved here to DC in late summer 1958. And see, if you lived here for a while, it's interesting these days. I meet people who call themselves Washingtonians, and that's fine. And then you say, oh, how long you been here? And they say, oh, like 6 months. Now, there are people here who will tell you these are kind of unwritten local laws that you have to have been a couple of, 2, 3 generations. African Americans of certain vintage. It's like, were you born Freedman's Hospital, et cetera, et cetera. So my first grade teacher, who's still alive and I keep in touch with, will say, you're a proud son of Washington, but I know she said this, there's like an asterisk beside my name because I wasn't born here. But when we moved here, 58, white flight was, as the rappers used to say, in full effect. And my friends and I used to call the weekends like the weekend of moving vans because like our white playmates were like that. That's the impetus behind this. White Flight, Washington, D.C., 1958. No more densely freckled girls looking dreamily at the leaves passing by the window. No more playmates staring quizzically at the Negroes on my father's album covers. Sarah Goldfarb reminded me of a girl I saw in an old MGM movie, even though her father said that, like my crush on her, was impossible. Rocco Quinzani was a dead ringer for Fabian. Who and where was I? Um, so in that case, it's like what one sees or saw in films and television. And of course, at that time, there was a greater paucity of Black figures. So you would see the music thing again. So Fabian and this constant change, and you're thinking, uh, what's wrong with you? You know, the speaker, because everyone's running away from you. It's so I guess it's like a companion piece to On the Road, and that you start to see things, and like Jimi Hendrix said, that ballad Red House, it's like, wait a minute, something's wrong. Um, so I mean, that's kind of the, what, if you want to say, inspiration for pieces like this, trying to make sense of what's like Marvin Gaye, like what's going on.
In the like, what is it, almost 20 years since between Fingering the Keys and Scattered Clouds, how
Yeah.
do you think they've, how have you changed? How has that current work changed from the first book?
That's a great question too. What I like to think, and I think you inch along in terms of progress. The most obvious difference to me is I'm one of these people who would kind of, when you come to a point where something needs to be said, I would tell a joke on the page rather than kind of go through something, or um, break it open, as people like to say in workshops. I think the newer things are more straightforward and less circuitous. It takes courage in and of itself, does not guarantee whatever good writing means to you, but that's a lot of it. And there are still things I don't, um, I'm still asking, we're looking for the courage to address. And I know at 60, 64, almost 65, I don't have 20 some years to think, well, I'll write about this in 20 some years. Well, you might not. But I do think there's more honesty. And it's not like you're trying to be a reality show, figure, and just throwing all your business in the street. And I think another thing is that if one writes something first person, the assumption is often that you are the I. And I mean, it makes sense. But I also think it's kind of an offshoot of, reality TV. And I don't write first person stuff as much as I used to. But like you're ready to go out to a party, you go through the closet and you're rummaging through your clothes, like, do I wear the pinstripes today? Do I wear corduroys? And so it's all part of that progression. I mean, here's, I think, an example of something that's a little more forthright, and you hope it's, quote, successful. And I was thinking about this each time a celebrity comes forth and discusses mental health or mental illness, and how afraid I think our society is of it. And I wrote this piece after, well, really, I hospitalized myself, depression. And what's the tennis player who said she was suffering from anxiety? And I thought, bless you for saying this, because we're so afraid of it. But would I have done this 20 some years ago? Probably not. But so anyway, I'll read this, and it's called Kind of Blue. But see, here's the music thing again. Naomi Osaka, thank you, Jason. Of course, Miles Davis has this wonderful album, Kind of Blue, 1959. So again, like, the music is never far away. But here we are. You feel bad, and you feel bad about feeling bad, and you feel bad because your erstwhile blues cause some to scatter, as if you forgot to wash, or as a sagacious sister said in group therapy, people act like you're going to get all Norman Bates on them and shit. And if you are like me, you blame yourself, the way you blame yourself for falling in love with things which further distance you from your peers, the planet. Then a rain-soaked rosebud appears, or your broken heart holds hands with a cello, and there's no one to see you smile. So I mean that's a newer piece, and I think the tone of these pieces are different. For me, the stuff in Fingering the Keys sounds younger, and that's not a qualitative thing here. It's just that you are like Frank Zappa once, you are who you is, and you just keep going. You keep going. I have some other things I won't share today because well, they're not just drafts. I call them zephyrs. They have a lot of work to be done, but they're in the voice of an older character, and they have to do with, I think, the landscape of middle age and how to negotiate this. To me, this in a way is a second adolescence because it's like you're not 90, but you're not 25, and you find yourself having sort of humorous conversations with your friends about like arthritis and more serious things, of course, like maybe parents with dementia and starting to see what Igor Stravinsky called generation loneliness. Friends and stuff start to kind of drop off. But see, that too is like you're on the road. It's part of the journey. It's part of the path. And um, who was it that said uh, something like he's talking about Jack Kerouac, right? He says, well, you know, um, go moan for man and of this world report you well and truly. So I think part of the work of writing is to report this life well and truly, as well and as truly as one can, you know.
Okay. I've got a few more questions here. Do you have any specific ways you challenge yourself to step outside your comfort zone as a poet?
Oh yeah, yeah. Form is one, and especially forms I'm awkward with, like the pantoum is this form which comes from Malaysia, and I would also use this to think about music. Say if you're playing something that's not in 4/4 time, which is kind of standard issue for a lot of Western music, and something is in 6/4. Well, it can sound wooden initially, like you're playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But what you want to do is mesh what you have to say with the parameters. And with Pantoum, they sound like someone writing something that's form based rather than, it's not a smooth dance. So I work on those things that I'm not comfortable with. And because it's easier to just do what you've done before in some ways, even if the subject matter is different. But so that's one thing. I'm working in incremental steps on a memoir with some folks who are beginning to help me, and this is different too, not just because it's prose, but it for me it seems to require even more, like Adrian Rich said, diving into the wreck. So I'm learning a lot about this, and even one of the things I learned yesterday, I was talking to a friend who's like a consultant, I call her, and it's like she says, "Don't you're climbing a mountain, don't rush this." And so, kind of reveling in the uncertainty is, which again is not unlike with the forms and all. But yeah, I think you should always put yourself in positions which will require growth. I in college I played in a little ensemble, played guitar and like this, and we have these arrangements written out, and the leader would say you're playing a song and thinking F, and he'd say, "All right, tonight," and this is like right before he called it, say it's in A flat, and you go because you're comfortable with F. and then you have to think. It's the same chord structure, but it's in a different key, um, different, sharps and flats or what have you, regardless of. And sometimes you stumble, but it's okay. I think that's the other thing for me. It's like I know this isn't death. To stumble isn't death, but uh, to progress, to keep going, and because you can be so pat on things, like they sound nice, but you want, I think, and see, here I am quoting musicians again. There's a saxophonist named Albert Eiler who said, he said, well, my music is about feelings. It's not about notes. You can have the notes, but the feelings, what's there, what's going to touch you the way, like the ministers I referred to earlier often did in, talking about some passage from Ecclesiastes or whatever it happened to be. So, yeah, I think to keep challenging yourself, writing through this persona I mentioned, this guy named Kelly Donaldson, who's an older black gentleman, that's that's a form of challenging myself. And even like lately, he's been, quote, sending me sonnets because he says, I love Claude McKay, who's a noted African American writer. So, it might be a sonnet about somebody he saw in the pool hall, but it's another room to decorate. How about putting it? You could put it that way. Another room to try and decorate and share.
What kind of music education did you have? Where did you
Oh,
learn about the fifth bar harpsichord
yeah.
counter melody that you wanted your friends to listen to?
Oh my gosh. Okay, let's see. Well, now both my parents loved music. My mother was kind of a closet classical pianist, and she was, I think she was afraid to share a lot of this because people might say, and this, you might not know this slang, like she was bougie or bourgeois, but I could talk with her about technical things. I mean, I'm a kid, and I would hear something in some piece by, like, my mom loved. Anytime I hear a Chopin etude, I think of her because she would. We didn't have a piano at home, or sometimes we'd be coming from church and we slip into a room and she'd play, and I'd say, "What is that?" And she'd say, "Oh, that's these are parallel fifths or what have you." Um, for some reason, this happened to me one night, and I was really freaked out about it. If you know this song by Sam Cooke, it's called "Cupid," and I had snuck my brother's transistor in the bed, and I had, they had earbuds even then, but they called them something else. So I'm listening to this, and the intro is like, well, I won't get too technical here, but it's like four measures, and there's a French horn line above the rhythm guitar. Well, I can see it as it's written on a score. I can see the notation for French horn, and then you have the chord symbols for the rhythm guitar. And I'm thinking, no. So I'm in bed and I'm slapping my head like this because I'm thinking, this is one more thing which will separate me from my peers. Uh, so that I don't know where it came from. I knew how to read music early, like 4 years old. And informally, my brother played clarinet. I would try and write pieces for him, which was more, it's like childhood uh, courage, and maybe, you love your brother, and that sometimes the key signature stuff was not right. And he would say, Ruben, well, there is no B natural in the key of F, but you can do it, blah, blah, blah. And then formally, fourth grade, DC public school, you could opt to take, quote, study an instrument. Well, I got my brother's hand me down B flat clarinet. I played that uh, fourth through sixth in the band and the orchestra. Seventh grade, of course, back then, seventh grade, you went to junior high. I was in the band. I played saxophone, tenor sax, fingering is similar to B flat clarinet. I also I took up French horn because of that song Cupid. I thought it had this stately, mournful sound, and so I'm doing both. And being an adolescent, which is disastrous. Um, 10th grade, I took up guitar because that's what the cool people did. Yeah, I've had a lot of music stuff. College, I took an independent in conduction because I wanted to know about that, and then scoring because I fell in love with the score "The Last Tango in Paris," which is written by a saxophonist named Gatto Barbieri, but Oliver Nelson wrote these beautiful orchestrations. And it's like you're in love with somebody and you want to know everything about them. And I had, you know, I could do that at Goddard. So I kind of learned the basics. But that's sort of the formal stuff, but it's always been coupled with, I guess, what or whomever is responsible for dropping uh, things in one's head early is how, you know, the music thing has solidified. And I will sometimes, like I look at scores, I'll get on the train, not so much now, but like, you read a score like you read a novel, and I'm laughing. This is good too if you want people to get away from you. Take a score and just start laughing at some musical joke, and they think like you're, so you want social distancing. But for me, yeah, I think music and the word, as we say in church, probably saved me, saved because it's, and I was stubborn about it too, because my father was a pragmatist. He said, "What are you going to do with all that stuff?" But when something's in you, you either push it aside or you just keep going. And like the more you know, the more you want to know. So, sorry, that's a little long winded, but that's
Okay. So what do you want to read next?
okay.
3 o'clock.
Let's
So
okay. Let's just do like what, one more, or I don't.
Fine, whatever you'd like.
Okay. Oh, let's see. Okay, this is I mentioned my parents, and I'm writing more about my father, and I guess another book there'll be things about my father, but my mother, because we shared this passion, and she was a language arts teacher, I was an English social studies teacher. I think there was such a bond between us, and what's that cliche? Like I'm more like her maybe every day. She had her stuff. We had our tips like we always do. But this, I was thinking about. She died in 2006, and so this is kind of funny, kind of not. I'll stop here, but it's my mother in the afterlife. Another thing I'll say about my mother is that she had very revolutionary ideas about politics, and I don't mean like 2021 revolutionary stuff, which is call your congressperson to have a serious face when you call. She wanted to, rattle the chains, but she also believed, you should look nice when you did it. That's like her upper middle class side, if you like. So there's a reference to that side of her in this piece. My mother in the afterlife. It is 1970 again. My mother is shaking her head at the sight of my clothing. She never abandoned her dream of a world without denim. Now there's no escaping her critique. You can't have coffee with God looking like that. She rolls her eyes at Abby Hoffman and at Bill, who owned the head shop near our house. Death has restored her mind. Now she's talking curfew. My brother laughs behind a cloud. There you go.
Wow. Cool. Well, I don't know, Lisa, what you want to do. You have any more?
You
wanna
know,
read?
there are other questions, but we can
There are?
also, you can read
I
more.
got to,
Well, isn't there?
I don't see any more.
Well, there's one here that says, do you recommend writers participate in writers groups where members share?
Oh, now okay. Sorry, all of
Okay.
a sudden they all popped up at one time.
Okay.
Sorry.
I do.
And
I'm sorry, I
or
didn't mean to cut you off.
engaging an individual trusted reader for feedback. So it's a combination question.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Okay, which one are you doing? I don't.
The one about the writers groups.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay, I got it.
I think it helps. Yes, I do recommend them because, needless to say, writing is a solitary act, and it's good to have the company of fellow travelers. You know, where the work is concerned, yes, but for emotional support and feedback about things you may not see. You know, if you're so close to something, say emotionally, it's you can get perspectives from people you hadn't considered. I have friends I've known for years that I'll send drafts to, and you know they'll get back to me and say, yeah, you know, that third stanza, that thing about whatever, you might want to reconsider that. I mean, that's a more one-on-one thing, but it's still reaching beyond uh, yourself, you know, because it is true that I forget, poet who said, in a sense, poetry is like you're talking to yourself about things first and foremost, but then to make that translation or that journey from, you know, like as I say in classes, from like, so there's the world, and then there's your head, and then there's your heart, and then maybe out yonder. You know, those workshops are good, and I'm thankful for the friends I have, you know, with whom I can bounce these things off. When I was saying that, I was thinking about this song by the blues musician Robert Johnson, said, "When you got a good friend," and that is, I mean, that's true on many levels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see. Have you ever put together a poetry playlist? I enjoy poetry, but sometimes it's hard to know where to start in finding writers and their works.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great project. I mean, I think one of my challenges is, see, because I started reading so many people from different eras, different nationalities, that I'm like those old radios, you know, car radios where you push one button and there's like talk, and then you hit another button and it's country, and then you hit another button and it's top 40. It'd be a good idea, you know, like people will ask me who are some of your favorite poets, and I go, oh God, well, it's 3:10 on Saturday. Who am I, you know, how would I answer that today? There are people.
You've done it with musicians, haven't you?
I've done it,
Come up
yeah.
with playlists?
I just, that's tough too, though. You know, it's kind of like when people ask you to do, it's like desert island records. I mean, like I'll say, this is maybe your first cousin to this question, but the last the last trip I made before COVID, I gave a talk in Rutland, Vermont, and I flew to Burlington. It's like a 90-minute drive south. Beautiful 2-lane road, nobody tailgating, blah blah blah. And I started reciting poems by Dylan Thomas, the Welsh poet, because they're just perfect for, I don't know, it's just that iambic pentameter thing, you know, if I were tickled by the rub of love, or working girl who stole me for a side, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you know, I'd maybe certainly put him on a playlist, but I'm gonna think more about that. I mean, it's a challenge. It's a good challenge, but I've never done it because I love so many people. I love so many writers for different things, and that includes a lot of rappers. Now, the subject matter may not be to my liking, but Like, for example, I would give a lot if I could uh, rock, as the kids say, internal rhyme like Notorious B.I.G. Oh my gosh, if I could do that, you know. So it's like you hear something and you think it's a reminder of what can be done with language, and I think something like a play this can remind you how varied that this is. You know, this genre is, and there's no end to it. You know, you hear some 15, 16-year old at busboys here in Hyattsville, and you think it can cause you to rethink what you thought you knew, or it just gives you a whole different perspective in it. It's a reminder that it hasn't all been said, and that's reassuring. You know, it hasn't all been said, and I just people sometimes want to kick me out of reading because I'll hear some phrase I never heard before, and like my Baptist comes out, and I'm like, whoa, whoa, and I'm not the reverent, quiet person when something excites me like that. I'm like, could you get this guy out of here? But see, it proves like once you're gone, it's not gonna stop. Somebody's gonna be cooking the eggs a different way, you know, the day after you die, the day you die. So that's I don't know. I love thinking about that. Not being dead, but but then it'll keep, you know.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Oh, let's see. What do we got?
We have, I don't, there's
Breath is important
a
in
comment.
reading.
I don't know that there are many more questions.
Can run.
Maybe like a couple more. I don't want to dictate what you're.
Well, okay. Someone wrote, breath is
Yes.
important in reading. Can run to current. I don't follow that, but okay. I don't see any new questions unless they,
Okay.
they haven't
I'd
popped
be
up on my
happy to have
screen
you
yet.
read more. I'd be happy to have Reuben read more, maybe one or
sure.
two of additional. I mean, it's up to you, Reuben. It's 8 minutes after 3. We can go till 3:30. So but
Could
we
I do
don't
like
have
say
to.
one more? I don't want to.
Yes. Pick
Yeah, I don't
one,
want to
yes.
cut you. Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Do the Trayvon Martin one.
You know what? I'm gonna grab this poem. I'm gonna read a Kelly poem here. So hang on.
Okay.
I'm just gonna grab this. Okay. Sorry. Disappearing moment in this recording. All right. So this is in the voice of Kelly Donaldson. It has to do with, well, again, being older and negotiating space as an older person in the world. And in fact, I'll do two of these because they're pretty short, and then I think that's a good way to kind of wrap things up. So Kelly, in his early ruminations, shall we say, each line is 3 words. Not always the case, but it's because he loves waltzes, and if you know the waltz form, it's 3-4 times, boom, bop, bop, boom, bop, bop. So someone asked him once. He said, "Well, it's because I like Johann Strauss." And then he'll stare at you like you don't like say something bad about Johann Strauss. So he's a little flinty, but reasonably nice guy. All right, so this is Kelly on middle age. I like glaring at phone addicted young'uns who hog the seats set aside for seniors on the subway until they take their blank gazes elsewhere. I also love talking old school jams with the coffee shop crew. We have no money, fixed incomes, yo, no girlfriends, and no more verbal reticence. Some days, my boy Melvin said recently, my knees creak like coffin handles in need of 3-in-1 oil. There used to be more of us laughing at his jokes. This is Kelly Recalls number 59, and this is, you know, growing up going to the cinema, as we used to say, and I won't use the profanity in it. Kelly Recalls number 59. My friend Tony and I used to go to the movies and watch debonair MFs like Cary Grant on the down low. The hood had its restful, sea-smooth brothers, but Tony and I were also hooked on the enormous screen, popcorn baptized in butter. One day when we were alternately humming a haunting Dmitri Tiomkin soundtrack and keeping an eye out for locally grown extortionists like Tyrone, we imagined being Botany 500 suit wearing, espresso sipping in French bistros, wise and world weary brothers, hearts broken like the gin bottles in the alley behind my house.
Wow.
Now, what I would say about this, I once told an interviewer that I think a lot of my work is a result of being growing up between Monet, meaning Claude Monet, and MF, you know that word. And so it's kind of the daydream world and maybe the grittier side of things. And you learn from both. But I think especially these earlier works from Kelly, these came out in this fledgling rag last year. You see the thing where you're at the movie theater and you're dreaming of being like cool guys in Paris, but then you got gin bottles behind the house. So that's, you see what I mean? It's like the Monet, and Dmitri Tiomkin was a great film composer. So what do you do with, coincidentally, I had these similar experiences where you got like Dmitri Tiomkin and Chopin and stuff in your head, and then you got uh, 5 ways to figure out how to get home from the movie theater because somebody wants to take your money. Um, I feel thankful to still be here in many respects because it's a lot, you know, it's a lot to juggle, and I guess uh, poetry is a way of making sense, of those things, and to, as I said, keep trying to. There's an old gospel song, keep working on the building. So you just keep working on the building, and
On the building.
so my quarter ends with the parking meter.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been wonderful, just really great. I want to remind everybody that the book's name is Scattered Clouds. You can, yes, hold it up, yeah. And it's available. You can get it. I don't know if it's on Amazon. Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay, it's on Amazon. You can get
Wherever
it there.
fine books are sold.
This is great. This is great. This was
Well, thank
really
you all
wonderful,
again.
Reuben. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We may send some messages to you afterwards to ask,
That's fine.
and you will certainly see the recording. It'll be up
Okay.
on our websites. I just want to make a couple of notes for everybody else that's here. Thanks for coming. We do have a session on Thursday, September 23, called Virtual Tour of the College Park Aviation Museum. Then in October, Cheryl Harrington of Shortcake Bakery will be giving you tips for holiday baking, which sounds wonderful. And in November the 6th, we're doing we will have Blue Sky Puppet Theater talking about puppetry then and now, which ought to be fun. So thanks everybody for coming. This has been really a truly great experience.
Thank
Thanks.
you all again, too. Appreciate it.